David Camerata and Amanda Wakes Up slid onto my relatively tranquil and serene book editor's desk like a steaming pot of double espressos. The thing is that I had never worked with an author who was involved in headline news. My novelists tended to write quietly at home in their studios or possibly in a cafe. Not Allison. She is in the thick of the fray every single day. And I, myself, am not much of a morning person. I tend to stay up late into the night reading books. So I have had to catch up with Allison, and I do mean catch up, by watching her clips online. And I really encourage you to do that because it is super fun. Or also, if you tend to be a morning person, unlike me, tune into CNN's New Day, which she now co-anchors. So yes, Allison is co-anchor on CNN's New Day. Before that, she spent some valuable time at Fox News. She worked her way up story by story from local stations to national ones, along the way doing some time as a crime reporter for the fugitive findings show America's Most Wanted. And I don't know what went into that, but it sounds like a couple novels right there, Allison.
Good point.
She is a veteran in the field, a clear-eyed, fact-seeking, truth-finding journalist who is passionate about her profession and just simply amazing at what she does. She is also a terrific storyteller, and maybe what she can't show us entirely on TV, but she does in this novel, is an even fuller range of talents. She can actually make up her own dialogue, both sides, and pitch perfect comic timing, a gimlet eye on character, and a knack for talking to people across political divides, which is perhaps one of the most important talents to bring to the current moment, either in a fictional, imaginative way or a real way, like she does on the news every day. So, this novel does have a political subplot. We put this novel into production at the end of October 2016. And that's when I learned what working with a news anchor was really all about. I have never, ever watched an author kick into gear like this woman right here. And Amanda Wakes Up, let me tell you, became more of a wake-up call than it ever was before. Allison is an enormous talent. She's a friend. She is quite simply the most awake and present human being I have ever met. I'm privileged to know her, to have worked with her on this book, and to be introducing her to you. And she comes to us from Westport, Connecticut, for those of you who are in that realm.
Wow, Carol, thank you. That is really, really nice introduction, and I will get into all of the motivations for the book. But first, I just want to say how excited I am to be with all of you today, particularly when I read that you all, one of the instructions for what I should speak about were my personal library stories. No one has ever asked me to share my personal library stories before, and I have many. So I am looking forward to this. Libraries are part of my formative experience. I mean, from birth. The month that I was born in Shrewsbury, New Jersey, construction was underway for the Monmouth County Library. And my mother used to plop me in a stroller and walk me a block down the street to where construction was going on for the Monmouth County Library and sort of walk around the grounds and wheel around the grounds and wait for this library to open. Fast forward 2 years to me being 2 years old, and my mom and I would go to the library regularly. I mean, every week we'd go and get new books and sort of comb the stacks and look at what we wanted. And my mother tells the story, and she's always told me this story. This isn't a new story. This has been my whole life. That one day when I was 2 and I was looking for books, there were these 2 other little toddlers, these sort of mop-headed little girls, and my mother just looked over at them and sort of thought, they look to be about Allison's age. I wonder if they'll be a part of Allison's life. And sure enough, those 2 other little girls I ended up going to nursery school with, and then I ended up going to grammar school with and high school with. They became my best friends. In grammar school, I went to a little teeny grammar school in Shrewsbury, they started an honors program. For those two little girls were named Jen and Gilly. They started an honors program that had never existed before for Jen, Gilly, and me. Early library exposure being the common thread, I feel, for that. And Gilly is still my best friend today. So it was planted there in the seeds of the library. And then one of my first memories, not just of a library, I mean of my childhood, one of my very first vivid memories, I was probably 5 years old. I was an only child, and I used to sort of wander around by myself. I had two working parents. So one of the things that I would do is go down to the library by myself. I would, walk a block, cross the street, walk another block, and go into the library. And I would, kind of wander through the shelves, and I loved looking at all the spines of books and thinking about them. And I would collect some that I wanted to bring home for my parents. I decided I would curate their collection, I would sometime, and also for myself. And I remember having a stack of books, and I marched up. I had decided that day that I was going to check out books. I hadn't done that before. So I was going to check out books for my first time. And I marched up to the checkout counter, and I had my books, and she said, "Can I see your library card?" And I said, "I don't have a library card." And she said, "Well, let's get you a library card." And I said, "Great." And she said, "Name?" And I said, "Allison." And she said, "Last name?" And I said, "Camerata." And she said, "How do you spell that?" And I said, uh-huh. And I stood there until I became completely flush with embarrassment. And I left the stack of books there, and I started crying. And I ran out of the library crying. And I ran home the 2 blocks. And my mother was there in the kitchen, and she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I don't know how to spell my last name, and I can't check out books." And she said, "Well, let's fix that." And she sat me down on the stairs, and she said, "Repeat after me, C-A-M-E-R-O-T-A." And I said, C-A-M-E-R-O-T-A. And until I got it, and she quizzed me over and over, and for however long it took until I got it, I thought I had it, and I marched back to the library, and my stack of books were still waiting for me, and I said, C-A-M-E-R-O-T-A, and she said, "There you go, you have a library card." And I victoriously marched out of the library on that day that changed my life, pretty much. I could go on, but I guess I should talk about my book. So, as Carol said, the book is called Amanda Wakes Up, and I started writing it during the 2012 presidential race. And I was working at Fox News Channel at the time. I was an anchor on their morning show on the weekends. And just to jog your memory, that presidential race had Herman Cain. It had Michelle Bachmann. I think Newt Gingrich was doing things in that campaign. So there were a whole bunch of colorful, interesting characters. And I was interviewing them. And frankly, I was so kind of vexed by some of the ethical dilemmas that were cropping up during that campaign. There were just a whole bunch of things that sometimes the candidates weren't truthful about. There were some things that my bosses at the time told me I shouldn't touch. And I was struggling with it. The ethical dilemmas of how to be a good journalist in that sort of climate. So I came home and I just started writing a book to sort of as a catharsis and as an outlet, and it was really helpful. It was helpful to take this sort of 30,000-foot view of what was happening in my daily life. I wanted to have a conversation. I wanted this book to be a conversation about what the ethics are of journalism and what the role is of journalists and what the challenges are of journalism in this 24-hour news cycle. And when we are sort of having to be consumed with ratings, and how do you make choices about things that get great ratings but may not be great journalism, and things that may be really great journalism but people don't want to watch. And all of those things I tried to embed in the book. But I also noticed that whenever I give speeches on journalism, as I do often, I just did it yesterday at a Hadassah women's luncheon. I often go to high schools and talk about journalism. I go to college classes and talk about journalism. The first questions that I always get are, where do you get your clothes? Who does your hair and makeup? Does somebody do it for you? What time do you wake up? How do you get to the studio? So I realized that there's this whole other interest in journalism that is, frankly, sort of the more fun, cosmetic, other stuff that people want to know about their newscasters and how we come to be on their television. So I recognized that there was a way to do both. And that's what I tried to do in this book. So I tried to kind of peel back the curtain and do a behind-the-scenes look at some of the really funny, quirky, oddball things that go into producing newscasts every day on cable news. Some of the crazy characters, the hair and makeup women, the stylists who know where all the bodies are buried. They have the juiciest gossip in the whole place. And the camera crew, those guys are funny and they're all characters in their own rights. And the egos of the bosses and the wardrobe mavens and all of that stuff, the competition between the anchors. So I tried to have that be sort of the entryway and the juicy stuff into these bigger conversations about journalism. And I certainly think that it's important right now to have these conversations. I feel, obviously, I don't have to tell you how polarized the country feels right now and the climate, and people are sort of really ground in on both sides. And I do try every day in my real job to bridge that divide, and I try in this book to bridge that divide and sort of be open to all sides. Because I guess at the end of the day, I think that that's going to be the key to bridging the divide. So that's what the motivation was for the book. And I look forward to hearing what you all think about it. In terms of what I'm currently reading, I know that was another question. I have a lot of books stacked up on my bedside table, but at the moment I'm reading The Art of Memoir by Mary Karr. She's phenomenal, obviously. I don't have to tell you guys. Just even writing a how-to about memoir it's such a page-turner and so compelling. And I'm reading it because, heaven help me, I may at some point write another book. So thank you. Thank you all.